I had finally told Natasha that I am superhuman and she just looked at me without a reaction and she said okay go on, and then I said I trained so hard when I was younger that I broke my mortal limiter, and it all started when I trained at the Shaolin Temple as a 10-year-old kid. It happened after 5 years of very intense training, and she asked me what the hell type of training would cause that, and then I said the type of training you do every day no matter what. I'd hear my muscles creaking and I didn't stop, and I would hear my bones popping and I didn't stop training no matter what, and then a part of my story finally clicked into place. The world I lived in wasn't just the I Spit on Your Grave universe, it's also the Baki Hanma universe and the Marvel MCU universe. And then I said I am the son of Yujiro Hanma, the ogre of Japan, and my father left me in America to protect me and my mother. I was born perfect, Natasha. And then Natasha smiled warmly and she said I'm also not who you think I am. My real name is Natasha Romanoff. And then I asked her what come again, and I almost couldn't believe it when I heard her real name, and she said my name is Natasha Romanoff, and somehow when you made love to me your DNA healed my womb and my reproductive organs, and that's how you and I were able to have children. And I have been meaning to tell you that Jack Hanma and Baki Hanma have been seen in the United States, and soon they might find you here, and your father Yujiro Hanma might also come looking for you. And then I said no it can't be, and then Natasha Romanoff said yes they are definitely coming here to find you soon. And then I said Nick Fury sent you to get close to me didn't he? And then Natasha said yes, but how did you know that? And then I said I know everything about S.H.I.E.L.D. and about the Avengers, I was an Army Ranger, and she took my word for it. And then Natasha Romanoff said that makes sense because I'm sure you at least know about Captain America. And then I said in my mind oh god no, I'm in a Marvel Baki Hanma universe. No wonder my Natasha looks like the Scarlett Johansson Black Widow, because she is the Scarlett Johansson Black Widow and she had my children. And then I said S.H.I.E.L.D. sent you to recruit me didn't they? And then Natasha Romanoff didn't hide it anymore and she said yes, because you don't act like the other Hanmas, you're a hero and a good person. Even when you were in the military you tried your best not to kill anyone. You're a real war hero, and that's why we need people like you for what's coming. And then Natasha Romanoff walked up to me and kissed me passionately, and I asked her was any of it real? Natasha, did you even love me? And then she said at first I didn't love you, but after the first few times you and I had sex I couldn't fake it anymore. Of course I love you, especially now, and you and I have children, Natasha Romanoff said. And then suddenly I heard a knock on my door and I looked terrified, and then I looked back at Natasha Romanoff and I asked her who's that? And then Natasha Romanoff said don't worry, I think it's my boss, and I don't believe your brothers or your father has found you this quickly. And then I said I wouldn't underestimate the Hanmas if I were you. And then Natasha Romanoff walked up to answer the door and I said wait Natasha, let me answer the door please. And then she said okay, and then I walked up to the door fast, and what I saw surprised me a lot. I saw Steve Rogers and Nick Fury and I sighed in relief and I said thank God. And then Nick Fury asked me are you okay son? And I said oh come on in please sir. And then Nick Fury said hello Natasha, and then Nick Fury asked me to join the Avengers and I accepted. And then I asked him why does he want me to join the Avengers, and then he said you have something very rare, you have your father's powers and his genes without any of the negative side effects. That's why I want to recruit you to help us defeat Loki. And I was surprised to hear that I am now in the events of the first Avengers movie, and I said inside my mind oh great, I'm in a fucking Marvel universe where the fucking Hanma bloodline exists. I almost can't believe this shit. And then Nick Fury said we are recruiting you because of your combat experience soldier, and you're also the most powerful human I've ever seen, and we are also recruiting you to keep the Hulk in line because Bruce Banner actually defeated Yujiro Hanma more than once. And I was very surprised to hear that. And then Nick Fury said but that was a very close fight even for the Hulk, and Yujiro Hanma came very close to beating the Hulk, but the Hulk gets stronger the angrier he is. And then I asked Nick Fury when did you want me to ship out? And then Nick Fury smiled and said today and now son. And then I said and what about Natasha Romanoff and my other wife? And then Nick Fury said we know all about what nearly happened to your neighbor and your new wife Jennifer Hills, and it's why you were asked to move here for your new job.